Hi, so today we're going to talk about education, and in the first part of the lecture I'm going to talk about education in terms of its relationship to other social factors like income and cultural values. So let's start with that. One of the biggest things that's interesting about education is what effect it has in society. So in other words, what difference does education make? And I'm going to provide 4 examples to show you what difference education can make for a person. We often wonder, getting a college education, will it get you a better job? Will you end up with more money and things like that? So let's start with the first example, and that is the economic effect of education, particularly with the relationship between income and education. So the first table is about the percentile breakdown of all the cases in this particular study. I extrapolated data from General Social Service that's done General Social Survey that's done every year, and they ask the question, how much money do you make? And so this basically breaks down income by percentile, and these percentiles will help you determine which income bracket represents the lower, middle, and upper income classes. The histogram is basically a pictorial version of that first table. It shows you sort of where all the cases lie, and so you can see the middle part where it kind of rises up to the top is where the bulk of the cases are. So the average person in the United States makes somewhere around $37,624. So again, this is all the cases put together in a national survey. So the distribution of income here in the histogram is anywhere from 0 to no money to upwards to 150,000 and then some. And then again, you can kind of see where it peaks, which is somewhere around $37,000. This also gives you a way of showing where most of the cases lie in terms of lower, middle, and upper end of the income brackets. So using that information, you can then recode the income to show lower, middle, and upper middle class, which is on the left-hand side, the column going up and down. And then if you look from left to right, you'll see education. So education has been recoded to show cases who have earned at least 8 years of education, which is junior high, 12 years education, which is high school, 16 years, which is college, and 20 years, which is graduate or postgraduate work. So as you can see, as you move from left to right, you can start to see some patterns. For example, those who earn around maybe 8 years of education, most of the cases are going to be around 35,000. So where all those cases lie. You're going to see most people making around that. You'll have some people, a bulk of them, making above and below that, but very few of them will actually make anything above $50,000 a year. Okay, so those who have a 12-year education or high school education, you can start to see a little bit of a shift in terms of those who can achieve more than $35,000, more than the average income. So you see, 25.3% making $50,000. 8.4 making $75,000, but you're not going to see a whole lot of cases of people who have a high school education making more than $75,000. And again, most of them are going to make right around the average income. Again, when you get to college, you'll start to see a shift in terms of those who make more than $75,000. You'll see possibly quite a few here making $150,000 or more. So once you get to a college education, you start to see people breaking that 6-figure ceiling. And then postgraduate is going to make a huge, significant difference in terms of where the bulk of the cases, which is actually around $75,000 a year. So really, your chances of making at least $75,000 is quite high once you have a graduate education. So conclusion would be the more education one has, the more likely their income will also rise. The second example is education and repetitive work. And repetitive work is considered, not enjoyable work. So we're talking like factory work or service-based work where you're doing the same thing over and over and over again those jobs aren't considered good jobs. So when asked the question, is your job repetitive, 48.9% said it was very, repetitive a lot. 26.3% said somewhat. 15.8% said it was a little repetitive, and 8.8% said not at all. Okay, so now were we to compare those with education and this sort of question with repetitive work, what would we find? So looking at the next table, you see that the more education you have, the less likely your job will be repetitive. So again, if you look at those who have, say, 7 years of education, 62% of them said that their repetitive was the work was very repetitive. As you move to the right, you're going to start to see that percentage decrease. So 57.6, 56.7%, 52.3%, 46.3%, 27.7%, and 21.7%. Again, that number is slowly decreasing as you see the education rise. And let's look at the not all row here. So you have 33.3% people who have no education. There's only 3 people, so it's not the best measure. So let's look at 1 to 7 years. So 5.4% of them said that their work was not repetitive at all. You're going to see that percentage increase as you move to the right. So those who say their work is not repetitive at all, 12.0%. Those who had a junior high education, 5.7%, 6.8%, 8%, 12.8%, and 24.1%. So by the time you get a graduate education, a quarter of them are going to have work that's not at all repetitive. So looking at that, the conclusion would be education can lead to a more enjoyable or less repetitive job. Okay, so the third example is sort of the cultural effect of education. So yeah, education can make you more money and get you a better job, but how does it change the way you see the world? Does it change the way you think about things? So the third example is the division of labor, or this question, is it better for men to work while women stay at home? This is the question that was asked in the survey. 9.9% strongly agreed with this statement that it's better for men to work while women stay at home. 29% agreed, 42.4% disagreed, and 18.7% strongly disagreed with this statement. Okay, so those are those of the people who answered this question. What was their education level? So looking at the next table, you'll see some interesting patterns. So those who strongly agreed, looking from left to right again, from education, those who had a junior high education, 17.2% strongly agreed with the statement that it's better for men to work while women stay at home. Now this is higher, right, than the average, 9.9%. As you go from left to right, you'll start to see that percentage decrease. So if you have a high school education, 11.9% strongly agreed. The college education, 8.6%. And finally, with the postgraduate or graduate education, 2.1% are going to strongly agree with this statement. So the more education you receive, the less likely you're going to agree with this statement. You can particularly see that in the last part here, strongly agree in this row going left to right. 10.3% are going to strongly agree with the statement of those who have an 8th grade education or junior high education. This is significantly less than the average 18.7%. Okay, so as you go from left to right along this column, you're going to start to see the percentage increase. Okay, so 16.4% of those who had a high school education strongly disagree. 17.7% of those who had a college education strongly disagree. And those who had a graduate or postgraduate education, 38.3% strongly disagree with this statement. Again, significantly higher than that average of 18.7%. So looking at this table, you can conclude that education tends to have a liberalizing effect. The more education one has, the more egalitarian they might view gender relations. For the fourth example, I'm going to kind of generally describe what's going on, but as part of the lecture-based activity, I want you to do what I just did, specifically point out interesting patterns that you see happening in the tables, and then come up with a conclusion based on the description that you had provided. So again, you look at the question being that sex, this is a view on morality. Sex before marriage, premarital sex, is it always wrong, almost always wrong, sometimes wrong, or not wrong at all? And then look at the valid percent column as a way of describing what's happening there. Then the next table is about, okay, the more education you have, what kind of impact is that going to have on your view on premarital sex? So again, go to the lecture-based activity and go ahead and describe the tables found in example 4, and then make your conclusions about what difference education makes.